Creating a new travel authorization. Now that our traveler profile is updated, we will create a new travel authorization request by selecting the Authorizations tab at the top of the page. On this page, select the New Authorization link. Confirm that the traveler name shows your own name. Is your trip going to be cross-funded, meaning funded and approved by an HHS organization other than your own home organization? In most cases, your travel will not be cross-funded, and so you will leave this field blank. Then select the Document Type drop-down menu and choose Auth, which is short for Official Travel Authorization. You may see other options here as well, such as Limited Open Authorizations, which can be used especially for urgent and emergency public health events. Then select the Next button to continue. This brings you to the General Information page. First, is your trip sponsored, meaning it will be paid for at least in part by a non-federal source? Most travel is not sponsored travel, so we'll leave this checkbox blank. By selecting the Sponsored Travel checkbox, the system will automatically create an additional sub-tab within your Travel Authorizations General tab containing an ethics questionnaire, which you must complete before signing your authorization request. Note that the system automatically assigns a system-generated document name beginning with the word trip, as well as a TANM, standing for Travel Authorization Number, beginning with the word TANM. These will be unique identifiers the system will use to represent this trip. Under the Trip Name field, enter a meaningful trip name. As with all text fields in the ETS, the trip name may contain letters and numbers, but no special characters. Next, select the Trip Purpose drop-down menu. The most commonly used identifier is Mission Operational. Note that the identifier Special Agency Mission should rarely be used, as few trips qualify under the FTR's criteria. Next, select the Type Code drop-down field. The type code TDY, Temp Duty Travel, should be used for most travel. If your organization would like a specific type code other than TDY to be used, then you'll be advised when to apply one. Next, select the Document Detail text box. Enter a brief description of the trip in this field. The purpose of the Document Detail field is to provide general information to the designated approving official about your trip. It is not for requesting travel expense types or amounts, entering justifications, or other such text. Requests for travel expenses must be itemized. Any requests for travel expense types or amounts listed in this field are not legally sufficient and will not be honored. As with all text fields in the E-Gov Travel System, the Document Detail field may contain letters and numbers, but no special characters. If your trip does not span a fiscal year, then you may leave both of the travel status checkboxes blank. These boxes are only used when your trip crosses a fiscal year between September and October, which requires the creation of 2 travel authorizations, one for each fiscal year. Within the first of the 2 authorizations, in other words, for the old fiscal year, you would check the End in Travel Status checkbox and leave the Begin in Travel Status box blank. This ensures the per diem for the last day of the old fiscal year, when you are still at TDY, is calculated correctly. Then, for the second of the 2 authorizations for the new fiscal year, you would check the Begin in Travel Status box and leave the End in Travel Status box blank. This would ensure the per diem for the first day of the new fiscal year when you are still at TDY is calculated correctly. For this example, our trip does not span 2 different fiscal years, so we will leave both of these checkboxes blank. Next, we will add itinerary location to our trip. Select the Add button. The itinerary location pop-up window will appear. Begin entering the name of the TDY location in the itinerary location text field. Be sure to search by city or by county. The system may not accommodate searches for specific government locations or facilities such as FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or Quantico, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Academy. As you enter text, matching results will appear below the field. Be sure to select the appropriate option from the list, as per diem rates are based on the city and county of the TDY location. Some locations, such as Los Angeles, encompass multiple per diem locations. If needed, we can change this field or narrow this down by address later. TDY locations not assigned a specified per diem rate will default to the standard rate shown here as Continental US. Next, enter the date you will depart for TDY in the From field. Alternatively, use the calendar to select the date. Then, enter the date you will return in the To field, or use the calendar option. The screen will show the per diem rates effective for the dates and location you selected. Next, select the Location Purpose drop-down menu and select the appropriate option. Again, Mission Operational is the most common option, as it refers to standard job duties performed at a different work location temporarily. Then select the Save and Close button if there are no other destinations for this trip. Or if there are additional destinations, select the Save and Add Another button to add those additional destinations. You'd only use this option if your trip entails multiple itinerary locations or destinations. If you are traveling to different locations as part of the same trip, by listing the additional itinerary locations, this will ensure you are paid the proper per diem entitlement amounts for where you are actually at. Review the dates, location, and purpose of your newly added itinerary locations. If you need to edit any of these elements, select the radio icon, then the Edit button. This will take you back to the itinerary location pop-up window, where you can make whatever changes are necessary. Be sure to select Save. To delete an itinerary location, first select the radio button next to that location, then select the Delete button. To add another itinerary location, select the Add button. This will open the itinerary location pop-up window, where once again, you can enter a new itinerary location, dates, and purpose. Verify that your travel dates reflect the first and last date of travel, then select Create Document. Be patient as it takes several moments to generate your authorization. You should now see your travel authorization request document. It consists of several different tabs, each of which consisting of various data elements. The default tab is the General tab. Here you can make changes to your trip name, trip purpose, document details, itinerary locations, and dates as necessary. Note that if you do change the travel dates, locations, or travel status, be sure to select the checkbox at the bottom of the page marked Reset Per Diem Conditions, and then select Save Changes. The next tab we will complete is the Accounting tab. Here, we will designate which funds will be used to pay for the trip's expenses. The Accounting Organization field should show your home organization, or, in the case of cross-sided travel, the organization that would be paying for your trip. The organization code, as shown here, is a special alphanumeric indicator that identifies your HHS organization. The travel management system uses the ones established in the financial management system. You'll need to know your organization identifier, and this can be obtained from a travel system administrator. Next, we will add an account code to the travel document. If you have an account saved under your favorite account codes within your traveler profile, or if you've applied account codes to previous travel, you can begin typing a label for those account codes. More likely, you will need to select the link enabled Add New Account Code. This will open the Add Account Code pop-up window. Confirm the default selection in the Account Org Structure field, or select the appropriate option from the drop-down menu. Then enter a custom label for your account code in the Label field.
This label field allows you or your organization to apply a unique, easy-to-remember custom label to the accounting information,
so that when you enter the name of the custom label, it will cause the system to pre-populate the fields fiscal year, CAN, and OCC. For example, if you regularly travel to Omaha, Nebraska, you might create a custom label named Omaha. Then when you enter Omaha into the label field, it will automatically populate the other required fields.
As with all text fields in the ETS, the account code label may contain letters and numbers, but no special characters.
If this account is not an HHS account, but comes from a non-federal source, you would select the sponsored checkbox, but in most cases, you would leave that blank. From the Fiscal Year FY drop-down field, select the appropriate fiscal year. Be sure to select the year corresponding to your trip dates. Next, select the appropriate common account number from the CAN drop-down field. The common account number is the account to which appropriations have been assigned. CANs are established in financial management systems, much like the way a bank establishes a checking account. These are set up every fiscal year for the year's travel. Most program offices will use one particular CAN for most of their travel, but not always. Check with your supervisor, certifying officer, or other administrative support staff in your local office to determine which CAN to apply to your travel authorization. You must select the CAN before selecting the OCC. Next, select the appropriate object class code from the OCC drop-down field. The object class code for travel and transportation expenses of persons always begins with the numbers 21. The subcodes shown here, for the most part, should be self-explanatory based on the brief descriptions. But if you need additional information, consult with your supervisor, certifying officer, or other administrative support staff. When you have completed all the required fields for your account code, select the Add to Document button to add your account code to your authorization. Here we can review our line of accounting, including the label, fiscal year, account code, object class code, and total amount of the expenses requested so far. To edit an account code, select the checkbox next to the label, then select the Edit button. This will take you back to the Add Account Code pop-up window, where you can then edit fields as necessary. With the checkbox selected, you can also delete an account code by selecting the Delete button. To add another account code to your authorization, select the Add New Account Code link and follow the same process as described before. Finally, if you are using multiple account codes within a single trip, you can select the Set as Default LOA button to designate one as the default line of accounting for your travel expenses. Speaking of travel expenses, let's head next to the Expenses and Receipts tab. Here you will list all the travel expense types and amounts you will need. Let's take just a minute to review one of the main purposes of a travel authorization. A travel authorization provides written notice to the employee of the expense types and amounts that may be incurred while traveling. Once the authorization request is approved, these expenses are fixed. Except as expressly permitted by law, an approved travel authorization cannot be retroactively amended after the start of travel to increase or decrease the expense types or amounts payable. Thus, it is very important to thoughtfully plan your request. Consider all the expense types and amounts you might need and include these in your request. If you fail to properly plan a necessary travel expense and end up incurring an expense type not authorized or overspending above the amount authorized, then you'll be personally liable for that additional cost. If an authorization is improperly emitted and you are improperly reimbursed, then the improper payment will be recouped by salary offset or collected as federal non-tax debt from your disposable pay or from federal payments such as tax returns. With those policies in mind, let's take a closer look at how the Expenses and Receipts tab is structured. The tab is vertically divided into two frames, one on the left and one on the right. The left frame contains a table with an itemized list of travel expenses, ordered chronologically by date. Each expense has a description and an amount, as shown in the table. The system has pre-populated certain expenses, including an estimated TDY voucher fee, as well as per diem lodging and meals and incidental expenses, M&IE, for each day of your trip, based on your TDY location. Note the action tools, represented by the icons of a pencil, papers, a clipboard, and a receipt, as well as a delete checkbox. If these icons are too small to see, use your browser's zoom functionality to increase the screen viewing size. We will use these action tools to edit or delete expenses. But first, let us add a new travel expense to our authorization request by selecting the Add Expense button located above the table. Now direct your attention to the frame on the right side of the screen. This is the Expense Details Editor. Here you will provide the details of your new expense or edit the details of an existing expense. For this example, we will create an expense request for a checked baggage fee. First, we will enter the date of the expense, expressed in the month, date, year format, into the expense date field. Alternatively, use the calendar feature to select the date. For this example, we will enter the first date of travel, March 6th, 2023. The field we skipped, labeled Create Expenses Through, is a shortcut that creates multiple copies of an expense that will be incurred over several consecutive days. For our example, although a baggage fee will be incurred for both the departing and return flights, they will be listed as a single expense in the invoice, so we will add them to our authorization request as a single, one-time expense. For now, we will leave the Create Expenses Through field blank. Next, select the Expense Description drop-down field and select the appropriate option. We recommend that you review the options within this field to help you plan what type of expenses might be necessary for your trip. Don't forget to include transportation between the airport and your hotel, transportation to and from meals, and transportation to and from your temporary duty work site. Remember that you are responsible for planning and requesting your necessary travel expenses. In this example, we will choose the first bag airline fee. Next, enter the cost of the expense as a number only, no dollar signs or other special characters. For expenses other than per diem and those associated with previously booked travel reservations, you will need to estimate the cost of the expense. You should overestimate expense amounts needed because you cannot be reimbursed a greater amount than authorized, and you cannot amend an approved travel authorization to add funds once the trip begins. Plan for possible contingencies now by overestimating expense amounts needed. Here, we will enter an overestimated cost of $100. There are many online tools outside of the E-Gov Travel System that can help you estimate travel costs, such as airfare, baggage fees, taxi fare, POV mileage, tolls, parking, and gasoline. We will use one of these tools in a later example. Next, select the method of payment for the expense. The GSA Smart Pay Travel Charge Card connected to your individually billed account, or IBA, may be used to pay for all official government travel expenses, so you should select this for most expenses. You can also set your IBA card as the default method of payment for travel expenses within your traveler profile. Depending on the type of expense you selected, additional fields may appear that are not shown here on screen. Complete required fields as necessary. One particularly useful field is the Comments field, which only appears after you select the link to Show Other Details. Use the Comments field liberally to provide additional information about an expense to those who review, approve, and certify your travel authorization request. The government does not give executive branch employees blank checks to spend on travel. You are expected to explain how the public's money will be spent. For example, use the Comments field to record cost comparisons, to provide further itemization, to note that an expense is not expected to be incurred but is requested just in case, or to justify exceptional expense requests, such as actual expense authority for per diem. In this example, we will further itemize our baggage fee, noting the estimated cost for both the departing and return flights. We will also note that the expense may not be necessary.
As with all text fields in the E-Gov Travel System, remember to avoid using special characters.
Once you have finished entering the expense details, select the Save button, either above or below the split frames, to add your new expense to the itemized table. If you do not want to apply the changes you made, you can select the Clear button instead to reset the page without saving. Now that we have saved our new baggage expense, we can see it within the table in the left-hand frame. Let's repeat the process by adding another new expense request. It's worth pointing out that if you are viewing the center of the expenses table, then you might have to scroll to either the top or the bottom of the left frame before you can see the Add Expense button. I'll select that button, then go to the right-hand frame to add the expense details. This time, we will create a recurring expense for lodging taxes. Some states exempt lodging taxes for federal employees on official travel. Others do not, and still others leave the determination to the hotel. You can visit the GSA SmartPay website to learn more about individual states' tax exemption policies, but it's generally recommended you request authorization for lodging taxes just in case. When you check in or receive your lodging invoice, you should speak with the hotel manager and request tax exemption. Many hotels will remove other charges as well, such as resort fees, if you take a few minutes to make your case. To enter a recurring lodging tax expense, we can use the shortcut involving the Create Expenses Through field. As before, we first enter a date into the Expense Date field, or use the built-in calendar feature. But now, this represents the first date of the recurring expense. Here, we will select the first date of travel, March 6th, 2023. Now we will enter the last date of the recurring expense into the Create Expense Through field. Here we'll select our last date of travel, March 10th. Take some care when using the Create Expenses Through feature. If you accidentally create too many multiple expenses, then you will have to delete them later, turning this shortcut into a long cut. As before, select the Expense Description drop-down field and select the appropriate expense type. In this example, we will choose Hotel Tax Domestic. As an aside, hotel tax for international locations is included within the lodging per diem. Again, remember to overestimate in the cost field. For example, $50. Again, not including the dollar sign or other special characters. If necessary, you can change the method of payment, though in this example, we will stay with the default IBA card. Once again, you can select the Show Other Details link to expand the Expense Details editor and enter any desired comments in the Comments text field. Because this example trip is set in Los Angeles, California, I will enter a brief note with what I discovered regarding California's tax exemption policy on the GSA SmartPay website. Now select the Save button, and we'll see that this recurring expense has been added to every day of our trip. Right. Let's see how close attention you are paying. Did you notice that we just added one day too many for our lodging tax? March 10th is the last day of our trip, but March 9th is the last day we'll need lodging, and therefore lodging taxes. If you won't incur a particular expense on a particular day, then you can delete it from an unapproved authorization request by selecting the Delete checkbox next to the expense. If necessary, you can select multiple expenses. Remember that you should never delete an expense that has already been approved. We will cover this in more detail in our training on travel claims. Also, as we'll soon see, there is no confirmation message for deleting expenses and no undo button, so make sure that any expenses whose checkboxes are marked should in fact be deleted before you select the Delete Selected Expenses button found at either the top or the bottom of the left frame. So far, we have learned how to create new single day and recurring expenses and how to delete expenses. Now let's take a look at the edit and copy actions. First, though, we'll add a new expense to our authorization request for a travel network company, such as Uber or Lyft, to get us to the airport on March 6th. The expense description here will be TNC, Transportation Network Company. And we'll enter an estimated cost of $36 on the IBA travel charge card. Then we'll provide some elaboration and justification in the comments field. Before saving this expense, let's briefly discuss two policies related to airport parking and the use of privately owned vehicles, or POVs. First, Department Travel Policy allows the authorization of POVs for official government travel only if the employee can demonstrate that all other modes of transportation would either A, interfere with the performance of the official business, B, impose an undue hardship, or C, cost more than the use of the POV. Second, if an employee does use a POV and parks at an airport, FTR Section 301-10.308 limits the amount they may be reimbursed for airport parking to the constructive, or reasonably estimated, round-trip cost of a taxi. Together, these two policies mean that airport parking should be a fairly uncommon travel expense. First, consider free shuttles. Second, common carrier transportation such as buses and mass transit. Third, taxis and TNCs. And only then consider parking your car at the airport. Returning to our demonstration, let's now save this expense. Then, locate it in the updated table of expenses. Our requested expense amount of $36, as you may have noticed, is a true cost estimate. However, as we've emphasized several times in this training, because the approved authorization establishes the limit for how much may be reimbursed, it is best practice to slightly overestimate each expense amount. You can edit a travel expense by selecting the pencil action tool next to the expense. The expense details for the selected expense will appear in the right frame. You can edit any of the expense fields as necessary. Here, we will increase our requested amount from $36 to $45. And likewise, add a little to our comment. Then we select Save to update the expense. Again, let's scroll down and view our updated TNC expense in the expenses table. Well, this will suffice to get us from work to the airport on the 6th, but we still need to get back from the airport on the 10th. We could do this by creating another new expense and filling it out, but given the fact that the new expense should be the same as the one we already have, other than the date, we can save some time by using the copy action instead. To copy an expense, select the icon of the stacked papers next to the expense.
The E-Gov Travel System will prompt you to confirm your action.
Unfortunately, the system is only able to copy an expense to the next date, but we can easily fix that by selecting the pencil icon next to the newly copied expense, changing the expense date field within the expense editor, and saving our change. Here we'll change the date to March 10th and save. Returning to the expenses table, we can see that copied transportation network company expense is now requested for March 10th. As you continue to plan your trip, follow the process we have just learned to add the relevant expense types and amounts to your authorization request. For this demonstration, we will not add every type of travel expense, but before we leave the Expenses and Receipts tab, I have a tip for adding expenses associated with travel reservations, such as lodging, airfare, or rail fare, or car rental.
As we will see in the next lesson, the E-Gov Travel System has a built-in online booking engine, which you can use to add travel reservations to your authorization request.
In so doing, the system will automatically add the expense associated with the reservation to your Authorizations, Expenses, and Receipts tab, which can be a real time saver. Notwithstanding this shortcut, you do not have to book reservations before you can be authorized to travel. And in fact, there may be times when you'll need your travel authorization to be approved before you add reservations to it. For example, suppose you are planning an urgent last-minute trip.
Although you can use the online booking engine to book last-minute rail, lodging, and car rentals, you cannot book flights departing within the next 48 hours.
This is an intended configuration setting, sometimes referred to as auto cancellation. But the fact that you can't book last-minute airfare doesn't mean that you can't be authorized and approved for last-minute airfare. Simply add the expense for your airfare to your authorization, along with all your other planned expenses, and sign and submit your authorization request as usual. Once your authorization is approved, call your Travel Management Center, TMC, give them your approved TANM, and have them book you a flight. If necessary, your agent can also help you reserve lodging or rental car, assuming that expense was also pre-approved. As long as your reservations cost no more than what you are approved for on your authorization, you'll be set and ready to travel. You can estimate the cost of airfare using the online GSA City Pairs Program search tool. Use either the drop-down or the text field to enter your departure and arrival cities or airports. Click the checkbox to accept the terms of service, and select the fiscal year search button corresponding to your travel dates. The search tool returns the City Pairs program contract details for your selected route, including the participating airports, the contracted airline, the one-way unrestricted government YCA fare, and, if available, the capacity-controlled blank CA fare. We'll discuss the differences between these two fare types, along with more information about the City Pairs program during the next lesson. You can use this search engine tool while planning your travel in order to compare costs and find the lowest fare available, especially if multiple airports are available that meet your travel needs. If you're traveling last minute, however, you'll just need a reasonable overestimate for airfare, so we'll use the higher YCA fare to include in our authorization request. In this example, the $365 YCA fare between Midway and Ontario International Airport. Hopefully, we will get a flight at one of the lower fares, but if not, we will still be approved for the higher cost. Note that the airfares shown in the table are for one-way travel, so to calculate round-trip fare, you can either double this amount or select the fare, then select the radio button for round trip.
Now we'll return to the E-Gov Travel System and enter this amount in our Expense Details Cost field.
It's always good practice to provide additional details to your approving official in the expense comments field, such as other city pairs fares that might be available. Finally, if you are planning last-minute travel, remember to add another expense for the TMC fee you will incur by having the TMC agent book your flight for you. The current fee for a domestic reservation is $39.45. You may see a dialog box appear. This just means that you will need to provide a justification for adding this expense to your authorization before signing and submitting your authorization request. Most of the time, you will not be planning urgent last-minute travel, and so you are expected to book your own reservations using the ETS online booking engine. By doing so, not only will you avoid incurring the agent-assisted TMC fee, but you will also have greater control of selecting your travel options. We will demonstrate how to book travel reservations in the next lesson, but before we do, let's take a brief tour through the last 4 tabs of the travel authorization. Select the Advances tab to request a travel advance for this trip. Note that only employees who are exempt from using the individually billed account IBA travel charge card may request an advance payment of travel expenses or travel advance. If you have been issued an IBA travel charge card, then you can ignore this tab altogether. Travel advances must be requested well in advance of the trip, so the requester has time to be paid the funds and for the deposit to their bank account to occur. Travel funds advanced must be accounted for and repaid to the government immediately if not used, so they are not recommended. If you are exempt from an IBA travel charge card and wish to request a travel advance, then select the Add Advances button. You will see your employee ID and name listed. In the Date field, use the Calendar tool or enter the date of the advance. Note that this field defaults to the current date. The Type field should be kept as the default EFT or electronic fund transfer. Next, enter the amount of the advance you are requesting in the Amount field, again with no $ or other special character. Complete the Account Code field by selecting the document icon next to the field. A pop-up window will open displaying the account codes that you added within your authorization's Accounting tab. Select the label of the line of accounting you wish to use. The pop-up window will close, and both the account code and organization fields will be populated. Scroll down to the Remarks text field and enter any necessary notes or comments. You must enter the specific reason you are exempt by the federal travel regulation from using the IPA travel charge card, the reason why you should be extended an advance payment, which specific travel expenses you will use the cash to pay, and the cost of each expense. The justification must match the expense types you requested earlier in the Expenses and Receipts tab. Finally, select the Save button. Notice that for this example trip, I cannot fully demonstrate adding a travel advance because the employee does have an IBA travel charge card and therefore does not qualify for a travel advance. Employees who do qualify for travel advances will see the same tools and icons we've seen in the other tabs in order to edit, delete, and save travel advances. For now, we will proceed to the Exceptions tab. The master list of other authorizations includes exceptional situations not typical to most TDY travel, involving certain regulatory or policy conditions which require the travel request to route for approval through a different channel or have additional approvals justifications applied so the condition is legally compliant. For example, the FTR requires a specific justification to be applied in order to authorize an employee to use a foreign flagged air carrier or ship before the employee can legally be reimbursed for using these forms of transportation. The system will automatically detect some of these exceptions, such as foreign travel and sponsored travel, based on fields you completed elsewhere in your authorization document. Others you must select yourself from within this tab. Review the list, determine whether any of the conditions apply to your trip, and select those that are appropriate. Adding an exception to an authorization serves as a written notice of the situation. The added exception will appear below the master list of exceptions under Other Authorizations. If needed, you can delete an existing exception here by selecting the trash can icon and then selecting OK on the confirmation pop-up message. Let us now proceed to the Profile tab. In the Profile tab, you can view certain travel settings from your ETS user profile, such as your organization and routing list, and modify these for a single trip. It is used only in exceptional circumstances such as cross-funded travel and will not be demonstrated here. If you do need to make any changes here, be sure to select the Save Profile Changes button to save your changes. We will review the final tab of your travel authorization, the Totals tab, and the first tab, the Summary tab, as well as demonstrate the process of signing and submitting a travel authorization in the next lesson. Before that, however, we will demonstrate how to use the ETS online booking engine to search for and add reservations to your travel authorization. You can view that lesson now by selecting the on-screen link. Thank you for participating in this lesson, Creating a New Travel Authorization.